Thank you very much. I would like to talk now and focus on post-harvest losses in Sub-Saharan Africa, particularly grain post-harvest losses. Cereal grains are actually a very important staple commodity for millions of farmers in terms of their production, but also it's an important part of home consumption. A lot of farmers produce for themselves, not for the market. So therefore, when problems occur in managing cereal grains, particularly post-harvest, we are looking at acute problems, in fact missing food. So for that reason, it is an important subject. I want to cover why have post-harvest losses become so important, what can be done to address the post-harvest losses, and to talk about a particular project supported by the EC on a losses information system for Africa. I think it's important to first of all highlight that post-harvest losses after a long time has now become a key focus for a lot of governments in Sub-Saharan Africa. As you can see from a news item in Kenya, it's clearly stating that the President is actually focusing on post-harvest losses as part of a food insecurity approach. One of the reasons for that, of course, is that recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, the cost of food has actually increased significantly after a period of 2 or 3 decades when people really hadn't focused that much on agriculture losses. It has now become a very high-profile issue. And that's partly driven by the fact that people no longer will accept increases in food costs, and there have been obviously very well publicised riots in various countries over the fact that the cost of food is increasing. Of course, people who can't afford to buy food will actually eat less. So perhaps the way forward is to increase food availability. Of course, one can look at increasing production, widening the distribution, improve marketing, but also one should also focus on perhaps looking at reducing losses and waste after harvest. It's already been mentioned that reducing waste is not just an important factor in terms of the losses itself of the food, but also the fact that it represents a big waste in valuable resources in Sub-Saharan Africa in producing food. A lot of inputs are required, fertiliser, water, land, labour, and therefore if we don't address losses, we are actually wasting those resources, and those resources are scarce and cost a lot in food production. As I said, for a long period of time, post-harvest losses has not been on the radar, but governments, for instance in the UK, have commissioned key reports, the Foresight report from the UK government on the future in food and farming, and equally international organisations like FAO and World Bank have actually looked at what they call missing food, in this case looking at post-harvest losses. So what can we do about looking at post-harvest losses? Obviously, we have to provide incentives and means for people to improve what we would call not only the quantity of food, but the quality. Quite often people talk about simple amounts lost, but in a lot of countries people can't afford to throw food away, so quality is actually an important factor, and so people's health are being compromised by the fact that they have to consume low quality food. once we start looking at the issues, particularly with smallholders in Africa, to try and improve quality and quantity that gets into the distribution system, we have to think about how they can work together, often encouraging people to work together to try and actually market food, grains together. But part of that equation is also strengthening the institutions that can support those farmers, and a lot of research and activity has been done on looking at things like warehouse receipts, commodity exchanges, so that these institutions can actually look at taking grain from the farmers and using it in a more productive way. And of course there's a big issue also about who manages that process. Is it a public or private sector process? I think a lot of people would view that the private sector, if properly regulated, has a big part to play in this. Also, we should encourage improved approaches and technologies to tackle the problem. A big key is not actually what are the technologies, but it's actually how to create access and information supplies to the key people, farmers and other people in the supply chain. And actually how that works is a key factor. And for grains, a key thing is also to support the technical community in developing countries. In the last 2 decades, very little money has gone into agricultural research. Most of it has gone into productivity, increasing outputs, but very little has actually gone into post-harvest management. And one of the key things that we've done in this project, which I will now talk about, AFLIS, is to actually try and provide support to local scientists. So we've, as I said, with the support of the European Commission's Joint Research Centre, created this project called AFLIS, which is looking at developing a losses information system for, to control post-harvest losses in Africa. And it's done with the cooperation of a number of institutions which have started to look at estimating the actual weight loss of cereals by country and by province in Sub-Saharan Africa. And what it does is try to calculate the cumulative losses of cereals through the whole post-harvest chain. And to do that, we actually involve and take information and knowledge from a network of local experts within these countries. And we have tried with them to develop methods and actually create data that we can put into an electronic system so that it's available to everyone to look at and understand how the data is used and what we can do with it. And as part of that, there's been the development of a calculator which people can use to estimate at any geographical scale, at province, at region, at country level, to look at estimating post-harvest losses so that we can start to appreciate the problems and develop the right strategies. And so a typical output from the calculator is tables, or it could be a map. And this one, for instance, just highlights the loss in maize by province. And these, you've got a colour coding to see losses that range from 5 to 35%. And by working at provincial level, you can start to tackle the actual problems, the actual scale of what is happening, and therefore really target new initiatives. And we think that the estimates can be used by a range of people, policymakers, so that they can start to develop coherent strategies to tackle losses, through the estimates identify where the key losses occur in the value chain, and therefore put in appropriate measures to improve efficiency. It can be used as a tool to improve overall food security, and where you have projects, programs tackling food insecurity, it can actually work as an M&E process. Lastly, I just want to highlight where we're going to go with this. It's a constant initiative of trying to standardise the approach. We're trying to collect more data to improve the calculator, and hopefully we will actually produce a manual to support the system of local experts so that they can actually understand and develop what we would call a narrative, an understanding of what is happening in their country, and really understand the true significance of both quantity and quality losses. As I say, quite often people understand quantity but not necessarily the quality losses. If you can tackle quality, you provide incentives for farmers to actually put in place measures. And hopefully we will produce manuals and information to provide smallholders to tackle losses at each stage of the post-harvest value chain. Thank you very much.